Season 3 of Love, Transform, Evolve is brought to you by Dreams Financial. Alex and Steph have been my financial advisors for years, and that's no coincidence. They don't just see me as a client, but rather as a partner in building and protecting my wealth. Their personalized approach and innovative solutions have made financial planning a breeze. And I love the fact that they are in it with me, explaining everything as we go, and I always know where my money is going and why. And when it comes to the death of a loved one, Alex and Steph are experts at providing compassionate guidance, offering clarity and direction. For more information, you can visit their website at dreamsfinancial.ca. Welcome to Season 3 of Love, Transform, Evolved. I'm so excited to have you here. It's the first season where you're actually seeing me give this a podcast. I'm very excited. We're doing things so differently this season. You know, the first season was called Lead with Love, and it was focused on love, and it was focused on a personal experience of mine. Season 2 was about transformation and how the caregiving role, the responsibilities transforms us as humans, and it challenges us. This season, we're talking about evolution, and we're talking about how to be better in our lives, how to prepare better for this role that is inevitably going to touch us, whether it is that we're going to become caregivers or whether we're going to need caregivers. You know, caregiving is, I believe, one of the most human experiences somebody could ever go through. It highlights, as I've said in previous seasons, our strengths, and it amplifies our weaknesses. How we show up to the table every single day makes all of the difference. We're also doing things a little bit differently here in that, yes, I'm sharing a couple of anecdotes from my life, but also every episode is going to focus on a topic, and it's going to have one interview with one person, because this way we're able to really dive a lot more deeply into what the experts have to say and into these things, these phenomena, the way we are in our lives more deeply. First topic that we're talking about today is stress. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had stress in my life, and I continue to have stress in my life. Maybe you yourself are dealing with stress right now, starting a new job, for example, going through a divorce. Maybe you have a family member who's recently been diagnosed with a terminal illness, or just an illness in general. Stress is a very big part of our lives, and we hear so much about what we have to do to mitigate it. And I wanted to talk to somebody who could tell us a little bit more and explain to us a little bit more how we can embrace stress in our lives. I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm so excited to be a part of this journey with you, and I hope that you get as much out of this season as I did. Between work, relationships, kids, paying the mortgage, and all the unexpected twists life throws our way, it's no surprise that stress feels like an unavoidable part of our daily routine. But what if we could actually rewire our brains to respond to stress differently? What if, instead of feeling constantly drained and reactive, we could train ourselves to manage stress in a way that helps us grow rather than breaks us down? Dr. Heiss is a stress physiologist, author, and keynote speaker who specializes in helping people rework their neural pathways to change their habits and thinking patterns. She's also the creator of the T-3 method, a science-backed approach to managing stress in real time. Today, we're talking about how we can take control of our stress response and build resilience in the face of life's constant demands. Dr. Heiss, thank you for being here.
Cynthia, that was such an amazing introduction. I kind of I am going to have a hard time living up to that. That was great. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you for being here. So I'm going to start really with helping myself and helping our listeners understand what stress is. And how we get there is I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story.
Sure.
So last night, I was very excited for today's conversation, and I had all of these excited jitters going, and I couldn't fall asleep. So I said, okay, I'm going to put myself a bath, make some bubbles, light a candle, some music. It was amazing. I got in the bath. It was wonderful. About 10 minutes in, my cat, one of my two cats, decided to jump up on the counter where the candle was.
No.
And almost as if in slow motion, but also in fast forward, I watched his fur light up a little bit in fire. Now he's fine. I'm gonna say it right now. He's fine.
Okay, good. I'm glad you jumped in there because my stress level was starting to
right?
Yeah.
Within a matter of seconds,
I was up and out of the bathtub, which freaked him out. He went running. I went running in my birthday suit with bubbles and everything following me. Couldn't find him. I was in my room. I went down to the main floor.
No.
I was all over the place. And in a matter of seconds, I was like, it was so fast. And finally I saw him. He was fine. Thank goodness. But then I was in this like catatonic state for about 5 minutes, I would say, where I just, my brain shut down, I couldn't think. And so can you tell me what was happening to me in that moment?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I'm so relieved that your cat is okay. I am so sorry that I caused you any kind of stress. And we're going to talk about, I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm also like, you're welcome that I caused you that stress, because we'll talk about this for your listeners in a bit about why I think stress is a really good thing. But here's what's happening. You had an acute stress response. So something set you off and your body went into this performance mode. So you had your heart started to accelerate, your breathing accelerated, your adrenaline or your adrenal glands were releasing cortisol and adrenaline and springing you into action to fight, flee, freeze, do the things that you need to do to handle the situation, which in this case was putting out the cat that was on fire, quite literally, which I'm laughing at now knowing that your cat is fine. But oh my gosh, an incredibly stressful situation. So really what's happening here is your body is priming you to perform. And it did exactly what you needed to do. And then you saw everything's okay. And your body goes, oh, okay, yes. We can shut down now. And that doesn't, see, the problem is you can't just shut down, right? All of those hormones are still active. They're still bound. They're still creating this tension, but your brain knows it's now safe. And so there's this weird mismatch going on where your body's kind of playing catch up to what your brain knows. And that's what causes that weird feeling of like, oh, I'm just weird and exhausted and I don't know how to even process what's happening in my body. And it takes some time for that to clear out, a few minutes, to your point. So that's what you're experiencing.
That's what happened. Okay. I undid the bath and I just laid in my bed and I was just trying to figure out how do I adjust my body and recalibrate, right?
Yeah.
How does that kind of, you said acute stress, how does that differ from the stress that comes from overwhelm when you're super busy and you're just, because I've known to be like that too, and my response is a little different. I get angry, I get narrow focused, I get like snippy. So
and all of those too again is your body responding in the same way, but it's producing a different result. So let's talk about that for a second. Actually, let me go back and redefine, as you asked me to do, the difference between acute stressor. No, it's fine. There's just the difference between an acute stressor and that sort of long-term overwhelm. So our body is really built, our stress response is really built for those acute stressors. And like a tiger chasing us but there were, of course, longer term stressors for our ancestors, like, famine or wintertime when you're going, oh gosh, there's a lot going on here and I've got to survive. And so our body has these two sort of balancing acts to play. One, that acute response is like, boom, take action right now. We got to go. And the overwhelm that we're typically feeling in the modern environment is about 15 or 20 or 20,000 of those acute stressors sort of compounded on top of each other. And so what's happening is there's no real like wave of going up and coming back down. Like with your cat, you're like, okay, it's over now, because it's never over.
Right.
And so the second we start to feel some relief of like, oh, I did that one thing on my to-do list, there's the other thing to do, and there's the other thing to do. And so we end up at this heightened long-term elevated level of stress, which means our acute stressors don't have to rise as much in order for us to reach that like panic level.
Right.
And we never really come down to the point where we can go, totally relaxed. So it's this constant kind of flat line up and down, if you can think of like small wave motion,
right?
Where we're not really relaxed, we're not really performing at our peak, we're just kind of surviving through. And to your point, what ends up happening is a different response, like angry. Oh my gosh, I'm angry, I'm snippy because I got to go and I got to move and I got to do the things. And we're not really harnessing that for good. We're just kind of getting through it. So that's where I like to come in and try and help people and say, well, look, yes, that is one approach. And there are other ways that we can handle the stress response.
So you bring up a really good thing. And, in all of the consuming everything that I've seen you put out there, both on social media and on YouTube, your website, I think you're like the Olivia Pope for stress.
Oh my
you're
gosh.
Like the PR crisis manager for stress. And
I love that. Thank you. I feel so honored. Golly, what a great comparison. I'm going to steal that.
But yeah, I mean, because, like I was saying in the intro, everyone tells us, to stay away from stress. We're taught that, we have to like reduce our stress. And, what you just alluded to and what you talk about is that stress is actually getting a bad rap and it can be useful. Right.
Yeah.
So what is the end? There are other things to do that you were just saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, let's start with just what stress is, right? Stress is a challenge, any kind of challenge to our body. And it can be good. It can be bad. It can be whatever we label it. It's just a response. It's something that our body has to respond to. So what I love is actually how you opened up this introduction. You're like, I was feeling a little like butterfly-y because I was excited about this interview. And I'm going, oh yeah, that's stress. But we don't call it stress. We call it, oh, I was excited. And like, I couldn't sleep because I was so excited. Yeah, but it's the exact same thing. You're just labeling it as something else. So there these high arousal emotions, anger, anxiety, excitement, that our body actually treats very similarly. It's treated as stress. It's a challenge. But we interpret very differently. So while we don't have control over the stressor itself, the thing that is causing some elicitation of response in our body, we do have control over the emotional valence that we label it with. So what does this mean to me? Is this something that I'm excited about? Is this something that I'm angry about? Is this something that I have to have anxiety about? That's what we have control over. And that's where the real opportunity exists, I think, for relabeling and using stress for our advantage.
So when you talk about relabeling, right, this interpretation of whatever it is that's happening to us, in those moments that I had when in the bathtub, in stressful moments, I'm not thinking clearly. And, this is a podcast. We talk about caregiving. We talk about, these type of real stressors in our lives. And oftentimes we are thrown into these situations where the interpretation of what it is that we're facing is through fear and anxiety because there's a lot of change.
Yes. Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about how, and I'm gonna just say I'm going to T-3 right now.
I love it. Let's do it. Let's jump right into the T-3.
But talk to me. Yeah.
I'll actually use your example because it's a good one. This cat catching fire. So the first step of the T-3, I mean, it couldn't be more perfect actually. The first step of the T-3, I call the tiger. And the tiger is this idea of, is it a tiger? Is this a life and death situation? And in your case, yeah. I mean, maybe not your life, but your cat's life, right? So what was happening in your body was perfect, right? Your heart was pumping so that your muscles could move fast so you could chase that cat or run away from the big cat that's chasing you. This is the whole idea behind the tiger. So really, the first step in T-3 is assessing, is this a life and death situation? And in 99.99999% of the instances, it's not going to be. It's not going to be life and death. It's going to be, oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed. If I get one more ping on that email, one more thing that I have to do, one more change that is coming down the pipeline, like it really feels like life and death, but most of the time it's not. So what I'll say is if it is a tiger, if your cat is on fire, your body is going to elicit that response and you're already going to perform at your high level because that's exactly what your stress is designed for. The rest of the times, I set a timer for 3 minutes and I actually allow myself to freak out for 3 minutes because in those 3 minutes, instead of trying to get rid of that stress, what we can do is actually start to rationalize with ourselves. Because as you said, we're not logical under stress, right? We're just not. And so when we allow ourselves the space and time, and I actually will write because it's the most cognitively demanding task. I will write down, I will catastrophize, I will say, here's all the things that are going to happen, and I'm going to end up homeless and jobless and alone and dead on the street and all of the things the terrible things that can happen. But what that does is it allows for me to validate the emotions that I'm feeling in my amygdala, right? In this ancient part of the brain that's going, oh, this really is a tiger. This really is a tiger. And when you write, you sort of force this cognitive space of your frontal lobe to light up in your brain and go, okay, this is actually rational. And you start to recognize that all of these things may not be totally rational. And after 3 minutes of screaming terror, if you are still alive, then it wasn't a tiger, which allows you then to move on to the second stage of the T-3 or the fear less stress formula, whatever you want to call it, right? And the second stage is the transfer of that energy. Because if I'm still alive, it's not a tiger. So now I can transfer that energy into curiosity. So I call this kind of the reappraisal of emotion, or the choice of adventure versus ordeal. I know most people right now are going, yeah, you don't know me. My life is an actual ordeal. And I totally get that, right? I 100% respect that. And we do have a choice in those moments to go, woof, this is a lot. This is a lot. What does this mean to me? Why do I feel so overwhelmed? How can I begin to use this curiosity portion of my brain to really allow me to recognize that this is something that I care about, and that's why it's causing me stress, right? Nobody ever gets stressed out over their shoe becoming untied because it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So really, it's a barometer for how much we care. And when we begin to recognize that, we can then align all of those butterflies and point them toward a trajectory. And that's the third step in this T-3 technique. The third step is trajectory. So where do you want to go with all of this energy? And so often, the whole point of the third step is actually the actual doing of something, the taking of action. Because stress overwhelms us to a point and we just like shut down. We procrastinate, or we're like, I'll just go feed the dog, or like whatever that, or I'm too scared. I don't want to fail. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to look bad. And so we don't take a step toward anything. And the cost of inaction is actually a lot higher than the cost of our action, but our stress will convince us otherwise. So those are the 3 quick steps: is it's not a tiger, transfer the energy with curiosity, and then take action along the trajectory toward something.
I think that's so wonderful and valuable. I think, and oftentimes in a caregiving situation, because we don't have all the information from a medical perspective, a lot of the times when things change, we think it's life or death.
Yes,
and
sure.
And because we don't know what's happening, right? The person's body might be changing, reacting to a medication, something like. So you're thinking that every situation is life or death. With my mom, especially having been beside her every single day with the cancer that she was battling, and she'd have these different symptoms. It was a lot on my system, and it took about 4 or 5 months for me to realize that yes, while her cancer was terminal, not every situation was this life or death. And I learned how to move from panic through eventually to having this kind of level-headedness. But it's tough in the moment to do that.
It's so hard. There's a lesson that I've had from a number of pilots who, go through extensive training when they're flying, for the worst case scenario, right? What's the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario is your plane is going down. And the number one thing that they train these pilots in these life and death situations to do, fly the plane.
Wow.
First, just fly the plane, because you know how to do it, right? You know how to do it. You know how to take care of you. And sometimes, especially in the situation that you're describing as caretakers, we forget, well, somebody needs to take care of the caretaker as well. And that is often ourselves. And it is a really, really hard thing to do, to just fly our own plane for a bit and go, okay, yes, this could be life and death. Yes, this is a really scary thing because it's new. And new things are always scary, but I have a responsibility to fly my plane. I have a responsibility to make sure that I'm okay in the situation as well. And that is sometimes that step back is one of the most grace-giving things that you can do for yourself. And it's so hard.
I love that analogy. When you think about self-care, self-management, such a big term in the caregiving space and all of that, a lot of the times the analogy that's given is if you're sitting in the passenger seat and there's, the emergency
oxygen
goes on, put the oxygen mask on yourself, right? But I love your analogy that puts the person in the pilot in the driver's seat. I love that, because now the pilot too, it's like, no, you're driving. You're not a victim or you're not a passive in this situation. Yes, you are active in this situation, and therefore you have that control. So
yeah, and Cynthia, it's so funny because I was thinking about this podcast this morning and thinking about some of the things that I wanted to say, and it hit me. And my gosh, I don't know. I may kick myself for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's where I am right now, with permission to change. I wonder sometimes if we are so obsessed with self-care that the idea of I have to give myself care, I have to make sure I'm self-caring right, actually becomes another form of harm for us. It puts us in this like shame cycle of like, I'm not doing it right. I'm not self-caring for myself in the way I'm supposed to self-care. And it becomes another stressor rather than being just fly the plane. You're doing it. Like, you're doing what you need to do for you. Just fly the plane. It's like, well, I have to fly the plane in a particular way or by somebody's rules or making sure that I don't do this or I do that. Yo, don't let this become another stressor. Fly your damn plane.
It's another thing to do. Exactly. One of the things that, the feedback that caregivers give so often is that, people will tell them, well, are you taking care of yourself? Don't forget to take care of your caregivers. Like, no kidding. I know I need to. But there's a lot of
thanks for the advice.
Right? And so self-care, self-management looks different for caregivers in different situations. Yeah. But I love this message of like, make sure you can fly the plane because this is now on your plate. This is something that you have to do. And so, don't forget that doing this the best you can is a form of self-care.
That's it. Yeah.
I want to touch on something that you said earlier too about the cost of inaction.
Oof. Yeah.
And I know,
this is big.
I know it's huge. When you said that, the thing that I heard, and in my own personal journey in life, being in my mid-40s now and all of that, is that
what
the cost of self-betrayal,
right? Ooh, that hits home. Yeah, for sure.
So can you talk to me a little bit about that cost of inaction?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think of cost of action, and I love the reframe as like cost of self-betrayal because I think they're one and the same, or two sides of the same coin. People regret a lot more the things that they don't do. And our brain is biased to say that's going to be better in the short term. The bias is always, well, don't take the action because we know the outcome and we can control the outcome if we don't do anything. If we don't do anything, we know the outcome, right? We know we just sat there and we didn't do the thing. And so we didn't set ourselves up for failure or rejection or any of those things. But it turns out that those are the things that fester because when we do take action, no matter what the outcome, we get data. Well, that didn't work. Or, that was a wild success, or there was some in between. And now I know something so I can pivot and I can try something new. But when we sit there and we're inauthentic or we're scared of what others will think, or, we compromise ourselves in some way because of that fear, what ends up happening is we dig our own grave a little bit. And I've heard this phrase a million times, and I think it's so haunting and so powerful. Most people die years before they're buried. Right? Like, all the chills, right? All the chills. And it's so true. It's so true for so many of us. It's that fear. It's that self-betrayal. It's that I'm not going to do this thing just in case. And I often will go back to Mary Oliver's One Wild and Precious Life. That's, you have one wild and precious life. What do you want to do with that one wild and precious life? And I guess the stress, the immediate stress that our brain fears is that action. But I think the much longer term and really grating stress is that lack of that inauthenticity and the lack of action that we take to protect ourselves.
Yeah, so powerful. And in a caregiving situation, oftentimes, caregivers will say that once their caregiving has stopped, they are transformed by the experience. Having been, personally and anecdotally, having been in close proximity to both of my parents at the end of their lives, seeing, the gratitude that they had on their way out, there's just this reminder of how precious and valuable life is and how this is not a dress rehearsal, right?
Your experience, and I think unfortunately true for so many caregivers, we often hear in my industry a lot about PTSD. I'm sure your audience has heard a lot about PTSD, this post-traumatic stress disorder where, you've been carrying, you've been pouring and pouring and pouring all of yourself in. And a lot of people do end up with some symptoms of PTSD. Now, like Americans, I think the number is about 8% are diagnosed with PTSD. But when you start looking at those symptoms, I would argue that a lot of us are carrying around some form of what I would call like a cumulative stress disorder, some kind of stress spring load, some load that we're carrying that we're not even always cognitively aware of, but it causes us to do things or to not do things. And I want to just give a full stop and acknowledge that and recognize the counter that nobody talks about, and I think is actually way more powerful, which is this post-traumatic growth and something that you just described. PTG is, most of the time when I bring this up in audiences, people are like, what's that? I'm like, well, that's a thing that after trauma, 80% of people go into post-traumatic growth without any prompting. So post-traumatic growth is this deepening of connection, deepening of purpose and meaning, this feeling of smallness, but oneness with the world. It is an incredible, awe-inspiring journey that people go on. And you hear things like, people who have gone through incredibly traumatic experiences, losing loved ones, losing limbs, surviving car crashes where entire families have died. And they say, I wouldn't have changed a thing because it's created so much growth and so much meaning in their lives. So I'll stop rambling there, but I do think it's really important that we talk more about these traumatic experiences that also inspire growth as much as they inspire, disorder.
I think, you're stopping there, but I think that's exactly everything I'm trying to do here. Is, the name of the podcast is Love, Transform, Evolve. How, the things that challenge us, that really take us to these really dark places where we don't even recognize ourselves, also have the ability to transform us and be more evolved human beings. Yeah. And in season 1 of the podcast, I spoke with the director of the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence, and she said, the majority of people in the caregiver advocacy space have gone through this and have this renewed sense of purpose and just want to be in this because they've gone through it. And then I think it's not obviously only relegated to caregiving. It's a lot of the times people take on these causes. They find purpose and vocation through suffering, through challenges. And that's where you have, people out there who are advocating for others in different types of situations.
Bingo. Because when it comes down to it, and actually, this is something that I'll mention because I do think this is a powerful thing that I rarely get to mention. But there was a study done, I'm forgetting the year. It was published in the Industrial Journal. So a scientific journal, scientific study, looking at 90 workplace wellness interventions for stress. So, everything from meditation to, apps and the typical kind of stress interventions you might see in communities. And all of them, save one, I'll put a big asterisk, save one intervention, all of them had no effect or actually made stress worse. The only thing that seemed to reduce or mitigate stress in some positive way was community service. Right?
Wow.
So it's that deeper connection to purpose and community, and that to me, especially in the space that you all are in, is such a powerful message to recognize, I feel all of this stress. It's tremendous and overwhelming, and this is meaningful. This is purposeful. This is actually something that is benefiting me as well as my community.
Incredible.
Yeah.
You mentioned the workplace. Right now, 35% of the workforce are identified as caregivers. I think that number is actually underinflated and underreported because people don't necessarily identify with that role. They're not checking that checkbox, right? People are professionals, people are, and all of that. The number is going to continue to grow with the aging population and whatnot. For people who are balancing work and care and the stresses that come along with that, short of leaving their job and going to do some community service and volunteering, in the middle of the workday, how could they, mitigate or work with the stress on a kind of very applicable, actionable way on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think this is the whole reason that I developed this T-3 or fearless stress formula is really to do this check-in with yourself as you're feeling that stress arise. And it's a 30-second intervention, which is literally as you're feeling it. Is this a tiger? Is this life and death? Nope. Okay. Can I have an adventure? What am I learning from this? How am I growing from this? What meaning does this bring to my life? Just asking yourself those questions, that curiosity in the moment, really helps you to harness it and say, yeah, look, this is stressful. And this is such a privilege. This is such an honor. This is such a gift that does bring meaning to my life. Because I would challenge any caregiver out there, even as you're going through the thick of it, pause for a second and go, would I give this up? Because truly, like, there's moments when you're like, yeah, I would. Absolutely. Let me get rid of this all. I'm done. Walk away. I get it. But I bet you 3 minutes of that, 3 minutes later, and you'd go, no, I can do this. This is meaningful. So I think really the advice that I give people is to validate yourself, give yourself that time and space to stress, to allow yourself to feel those things, because too often we try and thought stop. We try and say, oh, well, I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to push it aside. I don't have time for it. And when we do that, what our brain hears is just the thing. It's not stop thinking about that. It's whatever the thing that we're trying to stop thinking about, we think about more. And so validating yourself, giving yourself the time and space to feel the things, and stop trying to calm down. Like that is a misguided approach. When you're feeling like aroused and elicited and all of those like high arousal states of anger and stress, good. That is your body going, we have something we care about and we're responding. And I think that just simple acknowledgement of my body is helping me. It's enabling me to perform at this high level that I need to perform at, rather than going, oh God, I got to get rid of that. I have to calm down my heart. I have to slow down. I don't know about you, but I think I asked this during my talk with you all. The last time you told somebody you were really stressed out about something, right? And they listened, and they're like, yeah, you need to calm down, right? Like, you would have slapped that person, right? You would have just like, oh my God, that's a horrible response. And yet that's the thing we tell ourselves more frequently than not. Like, oh, I got to get rid of this. I got to calm down. You're giving yourself the advice that you really slap off somebody else. So give yourself the space to validate those emotions, recognize the feelings, and then I guess pin them to or correlate them with the meaning and purpose that you have. Because again, this is a 2013 study looking at a large swath of Americans and asking, what makes a meaningful and purposeful life? And the number one correlate to a meaningful, purposeful life is stress. Past stressful events, current amount of stress, and even future worry and anxiety. And so, as much as I think people are trying the best that they can, I often think we're misguided and trying to eliminate the very thing that brings purpose and meaning to our lives. So take the time to feel it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think
of course.
It's a perfect place for us to end this conversation. Dr. Rebecca Heiss is the author of Instinct. Her new book, Springboard, is coming out this year. Thank you so much for your time. I cannot wait to get my hands on that.
You are so welcome. Thank you for the opportunity and for the discussion and for the great questions. And I genuinely hope this helps you and your community. And if there's anything that I can do for any of your listeners, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am truly, I am reachable. please put the name of the podcast in the subject line if you do email me, and then I won't ignore you like I tried to do initially with Cynthia. So yes, I will get back to you.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much. If you like what you heard today, be sure to rate, follow, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Cynthia Iorio. Until next time.